What's going on, guys? Anyone who's played Hat format before should be very well aware of the artifact cards, specifically the 5 cards that I have right here being Ignition, Sanctum, Moraltech, Beagletech, and Artifact Scythe, as they are some of the best and most splashable little bit of engine that you can find in tons of different decks and are extremely powerful. But what a lot of people forget is besides these 5 artifact cards, there are actually 5 more main deck artifacts, being Artifact Caduceus, Artifact Failnaught, Artifact Aegis, Artifact Achilles Shield, and Artifact Labris. And surprisingly, back in 2014, these cards actually saw quite a little bit more play, and even into modern Hat format have seen little splashes here and there in different topping decks. So today I want to talk about what these cards actually do, since I know a lot of you probably have never even seen these cards before, and I also want to talk about why these cards might be a cool inclusion in your deck if you're already playing artifacts, whether that's in the side deck or main deck as a 1, 2, or even potentially 3 of. So that's what I want to talk about in this video, so let's get started. Now, similar to Moraltech, Beagletech, and Artifact Scythe, these 5 artifact monsters also have the basic artifact effect, which is you're able to set them in your spell and trap card zone as spell cards, and then they will be able to summon back to your field during the opponent's turn in which they are destroyed, and then they each have their own unique additional effect. So the first of the 5 artifacts out here I want to talk about is going to be Artifact Caduceus. The reason I'm choosing to talk about this one first is because from more modern recent Hat format tournaments, this is the one that occasionally will be an additional artifact a deck might play, and the reason that is because it has the effect that during your opponent's turn, each time an artifact monster or monsters is special summoned, draw a card, and you must control this face-up card to activate and resolve this effect, and you can only control 1 copy of it. So the idea is, in Hat format, getting any sort of advantage is very important. That's why cards like Card-D are a +1, but is very relevant in the format. So this card just allows you basically to get 1 additional draw each time you summon an artifact monster, which in a lot of cases, even off of things like Call of the Haunted, which are extremely popular, or even if this card was, say, in graveyard and you made a soul charge play, and then eventually on your opponent's turn activated a Sanctum, or did a play with Ignition, popping one of your artifacts and summoning back on the opponent's turn, it's a way to basically get an additional draw off of that. And what's even nicer about sticking this one on the board is, compared to a lot of other artifacts, well, at least the main other 3 that are most commonly played, this one actually has pretty decent defense stats of 2400, which means that a lot of cards can't actually get over it. Going against other decks that play artifacts is sometimes you have this position where you have, say, a Moraltech with 2100 attack in attack position, and your opponent does too, and it kind of comes down to, do you crash them, or, does your opponent have a monster that's slightly bigger that can attack over it, and there's a higher likelihood of this sticking and kind of acting as a wall so you can get back to your turn, while again also getting you draws. With that being said though, I personally am not the biggest fan of Caduceus in a splashable engine unless you're playing a very large amount of artifacts, which most decks usually aren't going to because they can be kind of cloggy, though there have been a couple more pure decks in the past that have played this, and in those decks I definitely see it as a good inclusion. Now, the next artifact I want to talk about is this one here, which is Artifact Failnaught. And unlike Caduceus, I think this one actually is pretty decent and has a pretty good chance of seeing a little more play in the right deck. Now what this one does is if this card is special summoned during the opponent's turn, you can target an artifact monster in your graveyard and set it to your spell and trap card zone as a spell card. So what's kind of cool about this is it's able to recycle your artifacts in graveyard and set them to your field, and I'll explain a little more in a second. While it is a little bit weaker than the others, that recyclability effect is pretty cool because of this one interaction that I want to talk about. There's a lot of times in different artifact decks, for example, I play a lot of H.A.T, and this is a common combination that you will find. Seeing a double Cyclone and a Call of the Haunted with no other cards, maybe it's late game or something along those lines. Now, when you see this combination, it's cool because usually, you know, the game's gone on long enough that you have a Madolche or a Scythe or something in graveyard, and you're able to Call the Haunted on your opponent's turn and then use the Madolche and pop a card. The problem with that is your double Cyclone will not really be live, or it could be, but you lose advantage in the process. So what I mean by that is in a usual situation, if you go Call of the Haunted and then you summon back your Madolche will pop a card your opponent controls, a face-up card. But then if you want to use double Cyclone and you have no other cards, you're going to have to pop the Call the Haunted, and then when Call the Haunted's destroyed, it will destroy your Madolche. So yes, you cleared your opponent's board in terms of, you know, going and popping a face-up card with Madolche and popping a back row with double Cyclone, but you have nothing left to show for it. So now let's enter in with Artifact Failnaught. Let's say now, you know, you have Failnaught in graveyard and Madolche in this example, and you still have your Call of the Haunted and double Cyclone. So what you can do is Call of the Haunted, bring back your Failnaught from grave. Your Failnaught will activate and set your Madolche. You can double Cyclone, pop your Madolche. Your Madolche will summon back, popping the face-up card. So here, you know, you've done the same thing you did before. However, now you have two monsters on board plus your Call of the Haunted. So if it comes back to your turn and you still have this as your setup, you can overlay these for a Pleiades. Pleiades bounce the Call of the Haunted, and now you have set up for another interruption on your opponent's turn with Pleiades, as well as that Call of the Haunted that can go and bring back your copy of Madolche. Another cool interaction with Failnaught comes when you have Artifact Sanctum and Ignition set with a Beagletech in graveyard. So here what you're able to do is use Sanctum on your opponent's turn and summon the Failnaught from deck. From here, the Failnaught can reset the Beagletech, and then from here you're able to Ignition pop the Beagletech and set any other artifact you want, whether that's something like, say, a Scythe or a Madolche. Let's just go with Madolche because it's the most common to come up in a lot of situations. So you will set the Madolche, and then from here, the Beagletech will summon back. The Beagletech, you know, this is a very common interaction that happens in any deck playing artifacts. The Beagletech will then activate, popping the Madolche, summoning back the Madolche, popping an opponent's card, and here you are now having 3 monsters on board, which in some cases you might just start your turn, switch the Beagletech to attack, and push for some damage, or in some cases you could even just overlay these and go for some rank 5 and still have an additional body to do some extra damage with. So in my opinion, I actually really do like Failnaught as a card, and I could definitely see it seeing slightly more play. The next artifact I want to talk about is Artifact Aegis, and this one is actually really cool because out of the artifacts I'm showing, this one has the most defense, having 2,500, so if you summon this off of a Sanctum or something, it actually can be very difficult for a lot of decks to out, where Caduceus has 2,400, this one can even block Stardust just because it has the extra defense, meaning they won't be able to get over it, they'll need something larger, as well as it has a pretty alright effect. This one has the effect right here that if this card is special summoned during your opponent's turn, artifact monsters monsters you control cannot be targeted or destroyed by opponents' card effects until the end of this turn. So there's a lot of situations where I've summoned, say, 2 to 3 artifacts on the opponent's turn. If I, say, did all of that during the battle phase, or say Call the Haunted, a Moraltech, pop a card, then Sanctum, summon Moraltech, pop a card, a lot of times it will clear their board and they'll end up just going and using something like Dark Hole, or throughout that whole play just doing a Torrential, a Bottomless, and kind of just clearing out your board and leaving you in an awkward situation. So with Aegis, this one's actually really cool because it will prevent your other artifacts, and itself for that matter, once it's activated, to not be destroyed by card effects, and it also stops the targeting, meaning cards like Breakthrough Skill and Compulse won't be able to negate the effects or bounce them, or just other cards that do target or destroy for that matter. Being able to throw this out right away is very good, and it is a lingering effect similar to Scythe, so in general, I think this card is very unique as well. The next artifact is Artifact Achilles Shield, and this one I think would probably be more of a good card in the sideboard as a one-of, or if you play it in the main deck as any sort of variation of this card or any amount of this card. I would say that usually it will be best against a lot of your aggro decks, so against things even like Mermail or Dragon Rulers or Lightsworn Ruler, which sometimes the artifact decks can have a problem with because cards like Judgment Dragon can just completely blow out their whole back row and put them in a bad situation. Achilles Shield has a very unique effect, and what that is right here, that if this card is special summoned during your opponent's turn, your opponent cannot target artifact monsters you control for attacks for the rest of this turn. So what that means is if your opponent goes and say they're going to make a big push with a lot of their things and you have a Sanctum set, usually Sanctum, what it's going to do is summon a Moraltech, like I've mentioned previously in this video, and it will just be able to pop one card. But usually those more aggro decks just have monsters that can beat over the Moraltech, and a lot of times still OTK you through that. What Achilles Shield does, say you activate Sanctum, you will summon this, and then they won't be able to target your artifact monsters for attacks, and unlike other cards that have similar type effects, this one includes itself. It doesn't say other artifact cards or other artifact monsters, it just says artifact monsters in general cannot be targeted for attacks, meaning if you just summon this one, it almost acts as a level 5 artifact battle fader in a sense. Now obviously if they have a card to negate it, it's not going to have any impact, but in general if there's no negate, then again, if you go first and say do this and then your opponent on their turn is making a push, this can basically skip their battle phase and guarantee that you get one more turn back that you can then set up and do other plays. The last artifact I want to talk about is Artifact Labris, which honestly is probably my least favorite and the one that I think has the least potential out of these other artifacts that I've shown off, but this one is also very unique compared to the other artifacts. So this one has the effect that when an artifact card or cards is destroyed and sent to your graveyard, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand. So the first thing to note is this one is kind of the opposite of Aegis in sense that this one has 2300 attack, so it is slightly larger than say Scythe with 2200, so it is a little more of a beater. The other thing is besides having the usual artifact effect that when it's destroyed on the opponent's turn you can special summon it, this one has the effect that when an artifact cards is destroyed you can special summon it from hand. So that is a very unique thing, and the other part of the effect is it says artifact card or cards, meaning if your opponent say MSTs your Sanctum or say MSTs one of your random artifacts, which a lot of times once your opponent knows you're on artifacts, they're going to wait to use their back row removal and MSTs and things until it's your turn, since your artifacts won't trigger on your own turn. You can kind of punish them by summoning this and having a beater, as well as if you have other things you can do. For example, a lot of decks will play instant fusion and things. If they go and pop one of your artifacts, you just summon this and then you can use that instant fusion or whatever else you need, and say make a rank 5. As well as, you know, if they pop your Sanctum, you can get extra advantage out of it because Sanctum has its additional effect, or if, say, they pop your Ignition, you can get extra pluses out of it. So this card is very unique, though I do think it's probably the worst out of the ones I showed. But anyways, guys, those are the other artifact monsters. I would love to know what you guys think, so if you guys have a favorite out of these 5, or which one you think is the coolest and most unique effect, or anything like that, make sure to comment that in the comment section. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like on it, comment any questions or videos you want to see in the future, share this video with your friends, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and hit the bell to get notified anytime I put a new video out. Again, these are just some cool little tech choices and options that from time to time we'll see a little bit of play here and there, but aren't the most common. But anyways, guys, I will see you in the next video.